Welcome to the August 24th edition of Octagon Outlook. I am James Lynch. Thanks so much for joining me here on this Monday. Always great talking to you guys and talking about fights. We had a busy weekend. I had a busy weekend as well. I don't know if you guys have been catching all the content we've been putting on the Line Movement channel. I did a couple interviews yesterday. I'll plug those at the end, but talked to Jeff Neal, Andrea Lee, Renato Moicano. So if you guys aren't subscribed, do so now. We're doing a really great job over here, not just with the MMA content, but if you like hockey, basketball, we got you covered on all angles there. Really appreciate it. Quick shout out to my producer, Jordan, who always does a fantastic job behind the scenes for this show. And let's get into it, guys. UFC Vegas 7. Everyone's been talking about it, the main event. If you guys saw it on my YouTube channel, I did a pros reacts video asking the fighters how they scored the fight. But in the main event, it is Frankie Edgar getting a split decision over Pedro MUNHOZ. I'll be honest, I was a little bit surprised by the scorecard. Not going to use the R word in this case. I've seen a lot of people use that, calling it a robbery. I mean, I did think Pedro MUNHOZ won the fight. So this is kind of how I broke down the fight a little bit in terms of how I scored it. So on the first watching, and again, I did pick Pedro MUNHOZ heading into the fight, but I thought Pedro MUNHOZ won 4 rounds to 1. I gave him the first round. I gave him the third, fourth, and fifth rounds as well. Rewatched the fight. I thought it was a little bit closer. I think he could have given either the first or the fifth to Edgar as well, but it wasn't a robbery. It was a very close fight. And look, credit to Frankie Edgar. You know, the big question I was asking last week here on this program is Frankie Edgar still a contender? And he absolutely answered that question as a profounding yes. Whether you thought that he won the fight or not, he still showed that he can hang in there with one of the best bantamweights in the division right now in Pedro MUNHOZ. I mean, this was a great test to see where he fit in, and he passed that test. I mean, had he even lost the fight, the fact that he took Pedro MUNHOZ to the brink like this was outstanding. So that was good. The other thing I want to comment about this fight, I thought the commentary was a little bit biased towards Pedro MUNHOZ. If you notice, Cruz seemed to really favor MUNHOZ in the fight. It seemed like he had something against Edgar. I'm not sure what that's all about, but I did take note of that during the broadcast, which I thought was a little bit interesting. So maybe that sways your view a little bit, but I did think MUNHOZ landed the better shots. I mean, he hurt Edgar a little bit in this fight in terms of his striking, in terms of some of the shots, but it was one of those cases like we've seen in other fights, like with Joanna and Jacek and Weili Zhang, where we have a fighter who's landing more in the case of Frankie Edgar, but you have a guy in MUNHOZ who's doing more damage. In the case of Joanna and Weili Zhang, it was Zhang who ended up winning just because of the power shots, and Jacek, even though she did land a lot of strikes, they didn't give her the nod. I think this was a similar case, but nonetheless, it is Pedro MUNHOZ coming away with another loss, back-to-back losses now. So we'll see where he goes from here. I'm hoping to get something with him this week to see what's next for him, because obviously this was a bit of a setback, now losing back-to-back fights. And for Frankie Edgar, I'll talk about some of the implications that people are talking about after this win, but I'll save that for the end after I do the rest of the recap of the card here, because you're hearing some crazy stuff as far as what is next for Frankie Edgar. Let's talk about the co-main event that didn't happen. OSP and Alonzo Menafield not happening. OSP testing positive for COVID-19. A little bit of interesting stuff there with OSP testing fine the whole week, and then leading up to fight night, the fight scrapped. So our new co-main event was Mike Rodriguez and Marcin Prashino. Rodriguez getting a huge win here. First round finish over Prashino. Great win for Emrod. Here's a guy that has had a lot of struggles in the octagon and struggling with consistency. If you remember, losing to Devin Clark, getting knocked out in his last fight. But the fact that he was able to go in there and put on the type of performance that he needed, just really impressive. I think that's probably the last we see of Prashino in the octagon. And for Emrod, Mike Rodriguez, he's kind of coming into the prime of his career right now. Lozon's MMA product looking really good out there in terms of what he was able to do. And at 205, they need more prospects. So to have Mike Rodriguez get a win like that, really impressive. And I think, going forward, he's going to be a guy that they're going to continue to build on in that division, and especially getting the win here the way he did. Very, very good statement win there for Mike Rodriguez in the 205-pound division. Also on the main card, I got this one completely wrong. Austin Hubbard ends up losing to Joe Selecki. Selecki getting the quick first round rear naked choke finish. What was so interesting about this is that Selecki had that triangle in standing forever. And, he had, and it was weird too with the camera angle, right? Because, Hubbard's back was to us. You saw Selecki with the choke in, and then all of a sudden he taps, and huge win for Joe Selecki. I mean, here's a guy who went the distance with Matt Wyman in the fight before that in his promotional debut, was supposed to fight Hubbard earlier this year, got COVID-19, ended up having to push this fight to a bit later, which he actually said benefited him, and clearly it paid off, being the first guy to stop Austin Hubbard in the octagon. So really impressive win there for Joe Selecki. He's a guy to keep an eye on now, 10-2 overall. For Hubbard, I think they'll give him another fight, but he has really struggled in the octagon. He was coming off a win heading into this fight, but you look at the fights before that, even his wins, like the win over Kyle Prepelic, for example, kind of a close fight as far as that win at UFC Vancouver last year. And then before that, obviously, losing to Marco Madsen and losing to Davey Ramos. So Hubbard now dropping to 2-2 in the division. Like I said, I think he'll get another fight because he's kind of entertaining, and I could see them matching him up with someone decent in that division. And for Selecki, big win here. We could be talking about a top 15 opponent for him coming up here, just with the type of win he got there. First round finish, that's the type of win that really puts you on notice with the rest of the division. So we'll see what they decide to do there. Maybe won't get top 15, but someone on the fringe there, maybe like a Vince Pichel or someone like that would be a fun matchup with Selecki, who I'm slated to speak with later this week. So we'll see what he has to say about that. I know he's going to be a dad soon, which is really great. How about this, though? We got to talk about Shana Dobson and Maria Agapova. Okay, look, I got this wrong. A lot of people got this wrong. And it's one of those kind of reminders to people out there, if you bet fights, if you're watching fights, to look at the level of competition they're fighting. Because you know what? I got blinded by it too. Agapova looked so good in the fight leading into this, getting that win over Hannah Cifers. But what is Hannah Cifers? She is a undersized strawweight, taking a fight on short notice, a weight class up at flyweight. So of course she was at a disadvantage. She's 5'1". She can be as strong as she wants as a farm girl. But when you're fighting Maria Agapova, who is, very lanky, very fast, very powerful, it's not going to end well. So I think people took that win a little bit too much and didn't look at who she was fighting. Someone that, like I said, could fight at atom weight and Hannah Cifers. And, Agapova looked like she was the real deal in that first round. She was pretty close to finishing Shana Dobson, but obviously Dobson, with that experience she's had in the octagon, with that experience she's had on The Ultimate Fighter, really paid off. Agapova, I think, got hurt at a certain point in the second round. We saw her take off in the stretcher, but basically when Shana Dobson got her to the ground in the second round, it was game over. You could just see it. You could see her body language. She was turtling up. Dobson took advantage, and props to her. Dobson, it's rare to see a fighter in the octagon with a losing record coming in. She was 3-4 going into that. I don't know if you guys heard, but this was the biggest betting upset in UFC history out of any of the odds. I think the biggest upset period was obviously Sokoju over Little Nog and Pride 33. But as far as UFC odds go, huge win for Shana Dobson, who gets in the win column here, saves her job potentially. She had three straight losses heading into this one, including a quick loss in the fight before this. Good for her. You know what? I love seeing stories like this where, someone goes out there and takes care of business. And we got to talk about too, there was someone I think who bet, what was it, $24,000 on Agapova in this fight, which, must be nice to be rich. Must be nice to have that much money and be able to use that. But why are you betting that much on a fighter who has one fight in the UFC and you were going to win $1,000? Not a good payoff there. You need a new financial planner, my friend. That was not a good move there. So, look, I thought Agapova was going to win by first round stoppage. It looked that way early on. It didn't end up happening, but it just goes to show you can't always trust the odds. And there was no reason for Agapova to be that much of a favorite. She should have been favored just based off what we saw. Dobson on the losing streak and Agapova obviously coming in there with the big win in the last fight, but not to that extent. That was the boxing odd line, basically. That's stuff you'd see there, or like any Valentina Shevchenko fight. It's basically like that. So, just again, another reminder to always look at the level of competition that they're fighting. Another fight that had a little bit of controversy, but still very entertaining. Daniel Rodriguez picks up another win. He's 3-0 this year, stopping Dwight Grant in the first round. Now, there was a lot of controversy with this because of the referee, Hatley. People felt the fight could have been stopped before that because Grant obviously was teeing off on Rodriguez. You could have potentially stopped it there. And then when Grant was finished himself, some people felt like that could have gone on a little bit longer. So there was another situation on the card, which we'll get to in a second as far as that goes. But a little bit questionable win there for Rodriguez. Certainly he was laying it on Dwight Grant, but I think that could have been led a little bit longer. And I also think the ref, if you're going to judge it based off that, why aren't you calling Grant the knockout? Because Grant had him in trouble. Rodriguez did not win this cleanly. It was a fight that he could have easily lost if it was another referee. So, tough break for Grant and tough break for both guys. These guys were supposed to have different opponents. They had to fight due to a bunch of things falling off the card. I don't even want to go through the opponents because it would take too long to sort of decipher through that. But Rodriguez now 3-0. Dwight Grant, a TKO loss, which is a big setback. But I think you got to put a little asterisk next to that one just because of the way it unfolded with the referee stoppage. So Dwight Grant will be back. I know he's a little bit older, but I thought he looked good leading up to that. And for Rodriguez, great story for him. Guy coming over for Combate and is really tore up the welterweight division here. So big win there for Daniel Rodriguez. All right, we're going to go through the prelims real quick. We don't have many fights to talk about anyways because there's so many cancellations on this card. In fact, there were more cancellations and changes on this card than actual fights. So that just goes to show you how injury-ridden and COVID-19 ridden this card was. We had Amanda Lemos getting the win over Inoue. No real surprises there. Lemos improves to 8-1. How about Jordan Wright? We didn't even get a chance to talk about this because Ike Villanueva was supposed to fight Gonzalez. Gonzalez is out, can't get the fight. Jordan Wright gets called riled up. I put the tweet out on Twitter talking about Wright's level of competition. He's fighting guys that are, subpar. And I didn't think it would go well for Jordan Wright because you remember him on Contender Series. He got absolutely starched by Anthony Hernandez on there. And he only had, I think, one fight in between there. And he's fighting Ike Villanueva, who's coming down from heavyweight to light heavyweight. This was kind of a weird fight, but credit to Jordan Wright. He took advantage. He really went at Ike Villanueva. He ends up winning the fight by TKO doctor stoppage cut, but this was the right call. Villanueva had to cut in a terrible spot. He was taking a lot of shots. Wright doing a great job with that Muay Thai clinch and really hammering some knees on Villanueva's head. I hope they give Ike another fight here. I know there's 2 stoppage losses, but all the changes that happened leading up, I hope they give him one more, especially at 205, which is his natural weight class. And for Jordan Wright, we'll see. I mean, this is still such a weird win as well because it was just so quick. I don't know how much we really learned about Jordan Wright in terms of his, ability to take a punch or anything else, but he looked great on the night. I'm hoping to get something with him, an interview with him. I interviewed Jordan years ago and just, didn't have time to interview him because of the late switch up, but I'm curious to hear about him now training with Anthony Hardonk in California. Because if you guys remember, Jordan Wright was training at Jackson Wink forever and switched things up. So really interesting to see him get his first UFC win there. He's 11-0, but let's not forget that win over Anthony Hernandez was changed to I think it was a no contest just because Hernandez tested positive for marijuana. So he should have a loss on the record. Come on. We all know marijuana is kind of a BS thing as far as that goes. But Jordan Wright getting the win there, and we'll see what's next. But it's probably at middleweight, which is the better weight class for him as far as that goes. And then the other 2 fights we had, Samuelsberger getting the win over Carlton Minus. No real surprises there. Good fight for both guys, but it's obviously it was the night for the fighter there in Samuelsberger as far as that goes. And then the opening fight, this is the other fight I was referencing. You had Trevin Jones getting the TKO win over Timur Valiev. Again, another situation where Valiev looked like he had Trevin Jones finished in this fight early on, and the referee let it go. And what happened? Jones recovered, and it was able to finish Valiev in the second round. So I thought the fight should have been stopped in the first round with Valiev, with the amount of shots he was taking in. And I think it was also another case where in that second round, I think Valiev should have had a little bit more time to recover. He did take a few shots, but you can see him get right back up after the finish. That's never a good sign from the referee. I'm sure Kerry Hatley will look back on this and be like, look, my bad. But not a great stoppage there as well. But good for Trevin Jones. I mean, the story of this is crazy, right? Comes over from Guam, takes a flight to Vegas with no guarantee of a fight, but he heard it was a possibility, was on standby, ended up getting this fight when Valiev's original opponent had to pull out, gets the fight, gets the win. Love a story like that. Just too bad about the referee, but big win there for Trevin Jones. And I'm sure Valiev will be back, but understandable with the questionable stoppage as far as that goes. All right. I mentioned it off the top there, Frankie Edgar, and some of the interesting things that could happen with this win. And I'll tell you what I saw, and I understand it based on who his manager is, but you saw the manager of Frankie Edgar, Dominance MMA, put a tweet out saying, who wants to see Frankie Edgar and Piotr Jan next? I'll tell you who doesn't, me, because I thought, not only did I not think Edgar won that fight, it was close, but also Aljamain Sterling's the number 1 contender. I feel like we did a rant on this a little while back, but I feel like the same gears are turning here as to what happened with Cody Garbrandt. Same manager, right? Where the manager puts a tweet out, people start picking up on it, and then they get sold on the idea of, a fighter getting a title shot when I don't think they deserve it. Look, Edgar had a great performance. Like I mentioned, he proved himself as a contender in this division, but you're beating a guy at number 5, just barely. And that same guy got, decisively beat by Aljamain Sterling in the fight before that. And then Sterling goes out and submits Corey Sandhagen right after that. Sterling's the number 1 contender. Now, I know Dana White at the press conference says that fight's likely going to happen with Sterling and Jan, but I'm just getting ahead of this thing because I don't want the news cycle to start spinning and people trying to get Frankie Edgar to get the title shot. Look, could he get a title shot? Sure, but let's let Aljamain Sterling fight for that title first. I think that's the move you make. You could give Edgar the winner because, I don't know who he would fight, to be honest. I mean, Dominic Cruz might be an option. That's a long time fight that they've been trying to put together with Edgar and Cruz as a former champion. You could do Corey Sandhagen if he defeats Marlon Moraes, but Moraes and Edgar won't fight each other, so the options are a little bit limited at the top, but I just want to get ahead of this thing. Like I said, I don't think Frankie Edgar should fight Piotr Jan next. We could do Jan and Sterling and Edgar fights the winner. I'm fine with that because, again, even though it was a close win, you just got to look at who sort of the contenders are right now as far as that goes. So I wouldn't have an issue there, but I would have an issue if Frankie Edgar jumped the line and got the title shot over Aljamain Sterling against Piotr Jan. So come on, UFC. Don't do this again. Don't give a fighter a title shot after, losing a couple, right? Edgar lost to Zombie and he lost to Holloway and he gets 1 win and all of a sudden we're going to give him another title shot. I don't think so. That shouldn't happen. Look, I thought Pedro Munoz won. It was a close fight. You could have given it to Edgar, whatever, understandable, but that's not enough to give him a title shot now. You could give him one later if the division, they're running out of opponents or whatever. But right now, no need to do that title shot. So that's my thoughts on that. Don't give it to Frankie Edgar. Aljamain Sterling, Piotr Jan, that has to be next. That's good. That's all I got to say here. Let's continue on. We're going to talk about UFC Vegas 8, which goes down this Saturday. We're not going to go through every fight, like I mentioned, even though this is a smaller card, but we're going to start first in the welterweight division. Sean Brady, Christian Aguilera, in no relation to Christina. Let's be clear about that. Sean Brady undefeated, Aguilera 14-6 record. Look, Aguilera looked amazing in his UFC debut. He got that win over Anthony Ivy on short notice. And here's a guy that has taken the long road to the UFC, fought the who's who on the regional scene to get there. Very impressive win. But I got to be honest, I don't know why he's fighting Sean Brady. Brady coming off a big win himself, getting that win over Ismail Nardiev in his last fight. He's now 2-0 in the Octagon. Yeah, we could see some finishes out of him, but still good run. I figured he'd get, someone in the top 15. So the odds right now have Brady as a big favorite. That's how I see this as well. I think Brady's the real deal. I think he's a prospect we got to keep an eye on in the welterweight division. I know he's not finishing his opponents, but he's still winning very dominantly. And I think he's a guy that we got to keep tabs on. And I like how they put him as the opening fight so we can get a good showcase to kick off the card here. The other thing with Sean Brady is he's been training a lot with Eddie Alvarez for this fight. I had the opportunity to speak with them and just to be able to work with a former UFC and Bellator champion and to get that knowledge from such a solid guy is just, such a good resource to have. So I'm going to take Brady in this fight. I think this may be the fight he could end up finishing it, where he could stop Christian Aguilera. We've seen him get knocked out on the regional scene before. That's a possibility. We could see Brady potentially submitting him. But I think Brady knows that he's got a good opportunity here because, like I said, he should have got someone ranked a little bit higher, in my opinion. Maybe not top 15, but someone a little bit more notable than Christian Aguilera, who's only had one fight, whereas Brady's had two. So I think this might be the fight where we'll see Brady get a finish in this one. So I'm going to go Sean Brady by stoppage. Maybe look for that inside the distance prop if you see it, but give me Sean Brady in this fight. I think he wins. I'd be pretty shocked if Aguilera pulls it off again and gets another win, but I like Sean Brady a lot in this one. Let's keep things moving here. We're going to another kind of interesting fight here. Alex Caceres and Giga Chikadze at featherweight. Of course, Chikadze coming off that win in his last fight over Irwin Rivera, which was an awesome fight. A fight that was on short notice as well, too. Rivera stepping up for Mike Davis, who was not able to fight. And Caceres coming off a big win himself in a pretty dominant win over Chase Hooper. And you can kind of see what the matchmakers are doing here. Again, it looks like they're trying to get Caceres to lose here. Caceres has had such an up and down career. I mean, 16-12 record. That's such an odd record to have in the UFC, to have that many losses and still be on the roster here. But you can tell they like Giga a lot. A really exciting, fighter as far as, skill set and everything like that. But it looks like they want to, get him a loss here. But I will say this, and, I'm curious to hear Dan and Dan's opinion on this fight later in the week, but I don't think you should count out Alex Caceres in this fight. If we learned anything in the last fight, this guy's got a lot of experience. The case is still here with, Chikadze only having 12 fights. Caceres has way more than that. Fought really good competition. Got a great ground game and good stand-up too. We saw the stand-up in the last fight. Chase Hooper could not hang with this guy on the feet. So, and Caceres, people think of him as being kind of an older guy in terms of his age and everything, but he's 32. Chikadze's 31. I mean, not a huge gap there as far as that goes. And the experience edge definitely goes to Caceres here. So I don't want people to do what I was kind of talking about there with Agapova, in the sense that, Chikadze just beat a bantamweight in his last fight. A bantamweight who's good, but not a featherweight. So don't put too much stock into that. And then you look at the UFC debut, again, or the second UFC fight against Jamal Emmers. That was a split decision, a fight that a lot of people felt like he didn't win. The win over Brandon Davis was good, but in general, just hasn't fought the level of competition that makes me think that he is this great fighter here. So the pick is going to be Chikadze, just because I think there is a little bit more upside. But if you guys are looking to bet this fight, or you guys are thinking that it's going to be an absolute slam dunk, I don't see that as the case. Caceres is always a game guy, and this seems like the type of fight he would win where people aren't expecting him to win. Again, just one loss in the last 4 fights. That was to Crone Gracie, a guy who's going to submit everyone pretty much. So I don't see Chikadze going out there and submitting Alex Caceres, and I could see Caceres keeping this on the feet, potentially outstriking him. But I think Chikadze's the safe pick here. But don't underestimate Alex Caceres in this matchup. That's sort of what I'm thinking for this fight. Let's continue on the undercard. We're going to do one more here. We got Mallory Martin taking on Hannah Cyphers. I had a chance to speak with Mallory last week, and Hannah I'm supposed to speak with later today. Curious to hear about her training camp. But we talked about Hannah Cyphers in her last fight. Just, I mean, at some point you got to look at your manager, your coaches. Why are you taking a fight like that? Look, that was a no-win fight for Hannah Cyphers, fighting a flyweight at flyweight in her last fight against a much bigger opponent in Agapova. So tough go for Hannah Cyphers, but she is losing to pretty good fighters. I mean, Agapova, yeah, I know she lost, but still decent. Lost to Mackenzie Dern before that. Lost to Angela Hill. Those are good fighters in the strawweight division. Mallory Martin. One of the interesting things about her is that she was really sick in her last fight. I don't think a lot of people knew that when she fought Janaroba. Was submitted in the second round, but that was a short notice fight. She mentioned the illness. She talked about this when I spoke with her and just said that, look, like I probably should have pulled out of that fight. So let's not take too much away from that UFC debut she had, which, like I said, was on short notice. fought good competition too, leading up to the UFC. Fought Macy Barber in her third pro fight, in a fight where Macy Barber missed weight. So that's something to keep in mind as far as that goes, where she's just fighting nothing but solid competition, and she's out of Elevation Fight Team. We saw Shauna Dobson get that big win last week. She's going to work with Montana De La Rosa and a lot of really other good women's fighters at that gym. So that's a good move for her. And even before that, Mallory's talked about having injury issues, and she finally got those corrected. She had a bad knee that she fought on for a couple fights and just got surgery recently. So, one of the things I took away from that interview with Mallory is that, she finally feels like she's going into a fight like, at 90%, not 50, not 60, like actually a lot better than usual. And that's a recipe for disaster against a Hannah Cifers, because Cifers, as good as she is, a lot of it is just the fact that she's been able to outmuscle her opponents in those wins. And the losses, we've seen the glaring weaknesses on the ground. And Mallory Martin, you can't afford to do that too. So I think Martin's going to end up finding a range in the first round, potentially knocking down Cifers in the second, and potentially submitting her. Martin's got a height and reach advantage in this fight as well, which is typical for Hannah Cifers. She's only 5'1". Like I said, that's more of an atom weight frame than a straw weight. So expect Martin to go out there, look the best she's ever looked, and get a submission victory here, and probably hand Hannah Cifers her walking papers, because I don't know how many women get 4 losses and still stay on the roster here. I love Hannah. She's a great fighter, but I just think she's much better as an atom weight. And I think she's going to, run into issues like here she will on Saturday against Mallory Martin. So give me Mallory Martin by a submission on the prelims there. Let's skip ahead to the main card here. We've got the highly anticipated rematch between Magomed Ankalaev and Ion Cutelaba. Of course, Cutelaba testing positive for COVID-19. That fight was moved to this card. Awesome fight to kick off the main card here. Really excited for this one. The first fight, as you guys remember, ended in a bit of controversy. People felt like the referee stepped in a little bit too early on that one against Cutelaba. Of course, Ankalaev won in like 30 seconds. So that's why they're doing the rematch. A lot of trash talking, a lot of back and forth here. But I think it's still Ankalaev's fight to lose. I think this guy's the real deal. 13-1 record. Cutelaba, the thing that concerns me with him a lot of times, he's just very inconsistent. You'll see him get a big win, and then he'll lose to someone he shouldn't. Like I always reference the Misha Serkinov loss that he had a couple years ago. That's a fight he should have won, and he ended up losing. And then, he gets a big win last year at UFC Vancouver when he defeats, it wasn't Vancouver, actually, it was the Khalil Roundtree fight that he got. I mean, that was a good win for him. But then, you see him lose to like a Jared Cannonier, and it's just, there's a lot of inconsistencies with Cutelaba. So there's no way I'd feel good about even saying there's any value on him as the underdog. I think Ankalaev wins this. I think the only way he doesn't win is if he loses it for himself, but I'm not expecting that here. Give me Ankalaev with another stoppage, maybe not first round, but I think second round stoppage is likely for Ankalaev to get the win here on the main card in the light heavyweight division. Let's move along to the featherweight division. We have a switch up here. So it was supposed to be Ricardo Lamas against Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall is out. Insert Bill Algeo. Now, if that name sounds familiar, Bill Algeo, if you guys remember, fought on Contender Series last year, ended up losing to Brendan Loughnane in what was one of the best fights, I think, of the entire season. It was just a really good back and forth battle. Algeo just showing some true grit in that one. Didn't end up winning, but certainly won a lot of fans. And now he steps up to fight Ricardo Lamas in this fight. And I see that most books do not have any odds for this, but I would imagine that Algeo might actually be the favorite here, just because he's younger, has a bit of a height and reach advantage in this fight. As far as the fight goes, Algeo's 5'11" with a 73.5-inch reach, whereas Lamas is only 5'8" with a 71-inch reach. Look, Lamas, 38 years old. He's lost 3 of his last 4 fights. It does concern me a bit that this is a case of a guy in Lamas who's just fought really good competition and is losing. So is it a case that he's lost a step, or is that he's fighting good guys? Because you're losing to Calvin Kattar. A lot of guys lose to Calvin Kattar. Losing to Mirsad Bektic. Bektic's still pretty solid. Josh Emmett, he got knocked out by as well in a fight where I think Emmett missed weight in that one. So really tough to gauge sort of where Lamas is at in his career. But in times like this, especially when you got a guy who's really got nothing to lose in Algeo, because even if he loses this, he'll get another fight, right? Like he's taking this on short notice. He's doing the UFC a favor here. And Algeo's been battle tested. I mean, 31 years old, prime of his career right now. And, you look at his losses, Brendan Loughnane, pretty solid fighter, lost to Jared Gordon back in 2017. That's a fight that might've gone differently. The loss before that, Shane Burgos. So Bill Algeo fighting really good guys. And I will say the fight that got him in the UFC was over a guy in Tim Dooling, who's 9-7. Not a great win there. And that it did end up going the distance, but I think Algeo will get it done. I don't know if he'll stop Ricardo Lamas. His last TKO win was again over Tim Dooling back in 2017. So I think Algeo will make it sort of a dogfight, but I don't think he'll finish Ricardo Lamas. So give me Bill Algeo by decision in this one. I know Lamas again fought solid competition, and it might be a case of me overlooking him here, but when you got a guy who's 38 years old, taking a plenty amount of damage, and by the way, who hasn't fought in over a year, more than a year, he hasn't fought since June of last year on that Chicago card. So give me Bill Algeo, the younger guy. I'm going to take him here. Whether he's the favorite or not, I still think he gets the job done on this card. So give me Bill Algeo on that one. Interesting fight in the flyweight division. We've got Alexa Grasso moving up from strawweight to take on Ji Young Kim. Grasso, pretty big favorite in this one. But I do warn people because Kim has a height and reach advantage in this fight. She's 5'7" with a 72-inch reach, whereas Grasso is 5'5" with a 66-inch reach. Now, if you remember, Grasso was supposed to fight Claudia Gadelha last year at UFC 246, or this year, I should say, almost close to last year. It was in January. But she missed weight, and that fight ended up getting scrapped. So the UFC's like, look, you got to go up. We don't want to deal with this anymore. So she's moving up, and yeah, a bit concerning. I think she's better at strawweight, but we'll see how she looks. Maybe the cut will, not having to cut as much weight, will help her in this fight. But like I said, she's a big favorite in this one. On paper, Grasso's the better fighter. I think there's no debate there. But I do worry about her fighting a true flyweight, someone who's fought pretty good competition herself, and Antonina Shevchenko, and fought Lucy Pudilova, has a win over Justine Kitch, which is a great win there. Beat Nadia Kassem in her last fight. Can't really take away too much from that. Kassem not exactly top flyweight by any means, but I think it's a case of, yeah, like Grasso's the better fighter, but she's fighting someone who has advantages in being a mainstay flyweight and being someone who's taller. So I'm going to pick Grasso in this fight by decision. I think she'll edge it out. I think she'll do enough to get the job done, but I would personally, from a betting perspective, stay away from this fight because I don't know how Grasso's going to look at flyweight. I don't know if she's going to struggle with the height and reach. And remember, this is a fighter that had a lot of hype coming into the UFC, and that was halted immediately when she lost to Felice Herrig. Remember that? Like, she saw it as like sort of this big, star for them, and she just hasn't lived up to it. And now, granted, like I said, she's fought tough competition, losing to Suarez, losing to Carla Esparza, but still, she hasn't been as advertised. So she's got to build herself back up in a new division. So I think she might even try and play it safe a little bit and go for the decision. So the pick is going to be Grasso by decision, but personally, I'd stay away from this one. I don't think the odds are worth it at what they are right now. Let's get to the co-main event. How awesome is this fight? It's very rare to have a replacement opponent that is almost as good, if not better, than the original opponent. So, as you guys know, it was supposed to be Neil Magny against Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal, sending our prayers over to him. If you guys missed our interview with him yesterday, talking about the health scare that nearly cost him his life. He thinks it's meningitis, but you guys can watch it here on the Line Movement playlist and hear Jeff's perspective on what exactly happened in that, as far as him, almost dying, basically. So Robbie Lawler will now be replacing Neil Magny, and Magny, I see, is the favorite in this fight, and totally understandable. Magny, the younger guy, has a height and reach advantage in this fight, but it's Robbie friggin' Lawler here, man. Former welterweight champion, a guy who's, we talked about Ricardo Lamas earlier losing to good competition. How about Robbie Lawler? His last loss was against Colby Covington, who I think might be one of the best welterweights, if not, could argue maybe 1 or 1A in that division with Usman. I mean, he barely lost to Usman in his last fight, and to lose to Covington, I mean, that's not a bad loss in your resume. And then even before that, you look at some of the losses that Lawler's had. I mean, these are good fighters. Rafael dos Anjos, Ben Askren. That was a controversial fight, right? People felt like the choke that Robert Lawler didn't tap, or that he wasn't out. So there was kind of an iffy one on there. And then losing to dos Anjos, getting knocked out by Woodley in a fight where, he was the favorite and he was the champ in that one. So another case where I think that you can't overlook Lawler in this fight, but Magny's looked good. Back-to-back wins since losing to Ponzinibbio. Got that win over Rocco Martin in his last fight. Close fight, but he did end up doing enough to get it done. I see this fight playing out one of two ways. I see either Neil Magny going out there using his range, frustrating Lawler, and winning a decision similar to the Dos Anjos fight, where he was able to sort of neutralize Lawler's stand-up and just get the better strikes and go out there and do a better job. But we know that Magny, in some fights, not recently, but in some fights, is a bit of a slow starter. So the question is, does Lawler at 38 years old still have that knockout power that we've seen in past fights where he's knocked guys out? Like, it's possible if Lawler tags Magny, he could knock him out. So I think either Lawler knocks out Neil Magny early on, or I think Magny wins the decision. I'm going with Magny by decision in this one, but I do see some value on Lawler as the underdog here. A lot more experience than his opponent. And by the way, guys, I don't know if you're aware of this, because I found this out interviewing Magny recently. He trained with Lawler actually at the beginning of his career. So these guys are familiar with each other. So there might be a bit of respect there for both guys. I think Lawler took this fight thinking he could beat Magny, but Magny is that a great team, an Elevation Fight team. I mean, getting to work with Justin Gaethje, and he, as far as guys with knockout power, he's getting that in Justin Gaethje in that fight. So the pick is going to be Magny, but I could see some value here on Lawler if the line gets a little bit crazier as far as that goes, because Lawler, while he does have a layoff, while he is 38, he's still dangerous, and you got to look at who he's losing to. Really good guys. So yeah, I think Magny will more likely though win the decision in this fight. Okay, let's get to the main event. Seen a lot of Serbian fans come at me. I did a pros picks video of this on my channel, and people are like, how could they pick Anthony Smith? He's going to get knocked out. Now, look, all the concerns that people have about Anthony Smith, I have those exact same concerns, and we'll get into them. Now, RAKIC, by the way, right now, about a 2-1 favorite on most books right now. But Smith, the underdog, but just way more experience here. But let's talk about the things that concern us in this fight with Anthony Smith. So We know the beating it took against Glover Teixeira in his last fight, which should have been called a lot sooner. I think whether it was the referee or his corner. I mean, he lost teeth in that fight. It was a beatdown. I mean, that fight could have been stopped about a round earlier. It could have. And what happened in that fight? Let's go back and talk about what happened, because I see a lot of people sort of talking about what happened in that fight and getting it wrong. You know, a lot of people saying that, oh, Smith, he didn't have good cardio, he gassed out. Well, yes, he did gas out, but it's not because he didn't have good cardio. It's because he tried to finish Glover Teixeira early in that fight, and that did not end up happening. Guy's 40 years old. He's still got a chin of granite, right? So when Smith couldn't finish him, he's kind of like, well, what do I do? Because Smith's the guy that's used to, you know, taking some early punishment and pulling off these comeback wins like he did against Gustafsson or against Volkan Ozdemir, right? So that's what we thought was going to happen in the Glover fight, and it just didn't happen. Glover stood tall, landed some serious shots, and Smith took a ton of damage. So, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Smith fought. And I think him coming back into this fight so soon is a bit concerning, because that fight against Glover was back in May. So 3 months, you know, just close to 4 months since the last fight. So that's a bit concerning heading into this one. You know, also the fact that he's fighting a guy who we really don't know how good he is. You know, that's the thing. That's what I was sort of arguing with people, was saying that, you know, is RAKIC really that good? Well, it's tough to say, right? His last fight against Volkan Ozdemir, most people, including myself, felt like he beat Ozdemir, right? By decision. It was a split decision loss, but let's count that as a win anyways, just for the sake of the argument here. Got a knockout win over Jimmy Manuwa before that. Finished him in the first round in 47 seconds, and got a win over Devin Clark in a fight where people forget that he was in a bit of trouble in that first round against Devin Clark. So not a clean win, so to speak, for RAKIC in that one. Got the knockout over Manuwa, but he's retired, right? So he was sort of on the tail end of his career. Kind of tough to say where Manuwa was at in his career. And like I said, just barely, in my opinion, beat Ozdemir, but on the record, it says that he lost. So keep that in mind. Like, I think kind of like last week's main event, we're going to get a lot of questions answered in this fight. How good is RAKIC? Well, we're going to find out, because he's fighting a guy in Smith who's kind of the similar thing. Like, you know, Smith has finished these opponents in Gustafsson and Ozdemir, whereas, you know, RAKIC couldn't finish Ozdemir. But he also wasn't behind on the scorecards, I don't think, against Ozdemir like Smith was. So a little bit different. Like, how good is Anthony Smith? Has he lost a step? You know, those are some things to look at as well. And as far as, like, you know, the height and reach and everything, like, you know, RAKIC is 28 years old. He's 6'4" with a 78-inch reach. Anthony Smith is 32, 6'4" with a 76-inch reach. So physically, they're pretty similar. RAKIC with the 2-inch reach advantage. Age-wise, 4-year age gap, not a huge difference there as far as that goes. But yeah, I'll say this. I think this is going to be a fight where we're going to understand a lot more about both fighters and where they fit in the division. Could RAKIC go out there and starch Anthony Smith? Possibly. He could be that good, but we haven't seen that from him yet, other than the Manuwa fight. And I don't think Anthony Smith is where Manuwa was at the stage when he was fighting him. So that's where I'm sort of basing it off this. And you got to look at the experience. I mean, Smith is losing to really good guys. Like, if Glover beats Thiago Santos in a few weeks, don't be surprised if he fights the winner of Reyes and Blachowicz, right? Like, we're talking about a title contender here, and, you know, RAKIC isn't at that level yet. I mean, he's close, but I don't think he's there yet. So here's how I'm sort of breaking down this fight. I'm going to pick RAKIC only because I think he's fresher. He hasn't taken as much damage. He's younger. He has some advantages in this fight. And I do think he is quite talented, but I don't think he's going to go out there and starch Smith. I see him potentially either winning a decision or getting a later finish in this one, but I don't see it as like an early stoppage type thing like some people are suggesting. I think RAKIC is good, but I don't think he's that good yet. I kind of getting some Johnny Walker vibes from some fans right now, being like, this guy's going to beat Jones. Real, like, let's see him. Like, if he goes out there and starches Smith, fair enough, but I don't think that's going to happen just yet. So let's cool the brakes on that. Conversely, I think this could be a situation where people are overlooking Anthony Smith. It's one fight he lost to Glover, and he didn't look great in as the rounds went on. But early on in that fight, how did you score that? I'm pretty sure most people would have had Smith up a little bit in that first round. So it's tough to say where he fits either. And, you know, he's getting a lot of good looks at Factory X. You know, Zach Cummins is on this card as well. He's getting to work with him. Dustin Jacoby, who won on the Contender Series recently, he's on this card, or he fought recently as well. So he's getting to work with him. Chris Camozzi. You've got Cody Brundage, who's going to be on Contender Series in a few weeks, getting to work with him. So he's got... It's got a good camp, as I'm sneezing because I'm just so excited about this fight. And you know, so that's obviously like a very good thing to have in his back pocket as far as who he's getting to train with as well. So I would say with this fight, I think RAKIC probably wins. But if Smith pulls this off, don't be surprised. And also, if the line gets a little crazy, I think it might be worth it to throw a little stab on Smith as well, just with his experience and just with the fact that he's a tough guy to put out. Like, Glover was able to put him out, but think of all the other guys who couldn't, like John Jones and like you know, so many other fighters that he's competed against. So the pick is RAKIC, but I think the value could be on Anthony Smith in this fight. So that's my thoughts on the main event for this Saturday. And kind of just talking about the card, some of the storylines that are coming out here. I talked about sort of the questions that are going into this fight as far as both you know, Robbie Lawler and Anthony Smith. And I think that's going to get answered here on Saturday. So look, if Robbie Lawler gets finished, if Anthony Smith gets finished, I think we can start talking about these guys as being sort of past their prime. And I know that's tough to say for Smith. He's a lot younger than Lawler. He's 32, but If Anthony Smith can't perform well against Alexander RAKIC, I think it shows that at this point he's a gatekeeper. And I think with Lawler, if he can't beat a Neil Magny, I think it's sort of the same thing. So the implications for Saturday's fight card are huge for both those guys, both for Robbie Lawler and both for Anthony Smith here. So we're going to get a lot of questions answered here. And I think that, if both come out and somehow both win and both pull off the upsets here, then obviously we overlooked who they were fighting in terms of competition. So keep that in mind when you're looking at this card as well, looking at who they're fighting heading into this fight. But it is a bit concerning that, Lawler just hasn't looked the same since he basically lost the title to Woodley. And for Smith, didn't look as good as he looked against, Gustafsson or some of the other guys, though. So we'll keep that in mind. But I think Saturday's, co-main event and main event is a crossroads fight for both Robbie Lawler and for Anthony Smith. And I think that's sort of an underrated storyline that people are not giving attention to, because both these guys have been pretty notable in their divisions for quite some time. So that's sort of what I think about Saturday's main event and co-main event. Another thing I wanted to talk about quickly, we didn't get to it last week, or I didn't speak about it there in the recap section of the show, but we had a new light heavyweight champion in Bellator as Vadim Nemkov finishes Ryan Bader. Huge win. I talked about this on the preview show. We didn't know how good Nemkov was, but he answered all those questions, getting the win over Ryan Bader, who, by the way, had a very tough weight cut to get to 205. So I'm not sure if that played a role. First time with Bader fighting at light heavyweight in about 3 years. So Scott Coker went on the mic and said, we have the best light heavyweights in MMA right now. And you might be right. Maybe Nemkov is better than Reyes or Blachowicz. We don't know. He just beat Ryan Bader, which is a solid win. Does that mean that he's the best light heavyweight? I don't know. I can't answer that. And of course, they're speaking of this because John Jones has vacated his title, so he's not in the picture anymore. So the question is Nemkov as good as Reyes and Blachowicz? He could be. But people taking the bait on this, that's sort of what I'm going to get on here as far as my rant goes. Like, a promoter's got to promote. Do you really think Scott Coker's going to come out and say, well, we have Vadim Nemkov, but he's not as good as John Jones or Dominic Reyes? Of course he's not going to say that. Do you think people are going to buy tickets if you're advertising as being the second promotion? You got to embellish things a little bit. You got to say that. And he might be right. Maybe Nemkov never loses in Bellator. Maybe he goes on this crazy run. Maybe he knocks out Corey Anderson in his next fight. Maybe. Those are all possibilities because we don't know how good he really is. This was a good win. Certainly puts him up there. He's a light heavyweight champion of Bellator, but we got to get some questions answered in the next couple months. And we'll see how Nemkov, who I'm assuming is going to get Corey Anderson next. We'll see how he does in that fight because Corey, just lost to Blachowicz in his last fight. So we'll see how that sort of translates over there. But people falling for the bait, being like, I can't believe Coker said that. Well, he's a promoter and he's got to promote his card. So guys, you got to look at that. You can't take the bait all the time and just get sucked into questioning his decision. Just know that he's a promoter and he's got to put fans in the seat. And you do that by advertising that you're an awesome promotion as far as that goes. So we're going to take some questions here at the end as we're sort of wrapping things up on this show. We'll do about another 5 or 10 minutes. Always like answering your guys' questions there. Max Holloway in the chat, not the real Max Holloway, but the same Max Holloway who always comes on my show and does his questions. He said, Edgar could be a top 5 staple, but he doesn't have the chin anymore against someone like Jan. I disagree with you there a little bit because MUNHOZ has knockout power. In fact, I saw people picking MUNHOZ by knockout heading into that fight last weekend. Edgar's still got a bit of a chin. There's 2 guys who have finished him in his career, and that was Brian Ortega, and that was the Korean Zombie, up a weight class. Is there, could Marlon Moraes knock him out? Maybe he could, but I don't think that fight ever happens unless it's for a title because they're good buddies. But nonetheless, I don't see the chin thing being an issue for Frankie Edgar, even though Jan is coming off a stoppage win in his last fight. Jan doesn't have a lot of knockouts in his career, at least not in the UFC. So I don't know if Edgar will get knocked out against him, but Edgar, I think, is still showing that he's right in the wrong series. All indications would be he's past his prime at this point, but he did not look that way on Saturday. So full props to Frankie Edgar for getting the win. Whether you thought he won or not, you got to admit he's a contender at 135 now. Are they going to give D-Rod a top 15 or someone like Ponzi? We'll see. I mean, again, I think the win there was a little bit weird in terms of the referee stoppage, but he is 3-0. They got to give him a top 15 guy. I'm down with Ponzinibbio. This guy needs to fight. So does Leon Edwards as well. Now, obviously, D-Rod would not fight Leon Edwards, but you're kind of getting my point. There's a couple guys in that division that just haven't fought in a while and need to start picking things up a little bit. So, yeah, you know what? If Ponzinibbio wants to fight D-Rod, I'm totally fine with that. Kind of what I'm hearing from just people in the know is that I know Ponzinibbio wants to fight someone ranked pretty high. His last win was over Neil Magny, a stoppage win. So I don't think D-Rod really fits sort of that category. Daniel Rodriguez, that is, that we're talking about. If Lawler beats Neil Magny, you could potentially do a Lawler and Ponzinibbio fight. They were rumored to fight before as well. So that's a possibility, but we'll see. Daniel Rodriguez, either way, is going to get a good opponent next time out because that was a nice win that he got there. Denise Knowles, good to hear from Denise, one of my bigger supporters over the years. Looked like she was taking a nap when Dodson was on top of her. That was extreme levels of exhaustion. She's better work on that. Agapova, that is. It's true. I think part of that was she was hurt, but you're right. It did look like some exhaustion there, but I honestly thought, kind of like the Anthony Smith and Glover fight, that I think Agapovic just expected, no matter what, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to finish Dobson early, and that didn't happen. And of course, she ended up getting the injury and ended up gassing out a little bit. So that's something to keep in mind too, as far as that goes, as far as her overdoing it. But she'll learn from this fight. Look, all these losses, like all these prospects that have lost this year, the true sign of a fighter is how you come back from a loss. Look at George St. Pierre. Early in his career, lost to Matt Hughes, was submitted quickly. A lot of it was mental, but he overcame that, and he ended up defeating Hughes in the rematch. So the same thing could happen for Edmund Shabazian and for Macy Barber and for Agapova, all these fighters, that you learn more from a loss than a win. That's just how it is. So, let's see how she does in the next fight and see how she makes adjustments as far as that goes. What else we have here as far as other questions here? Grasso has the striking to take this fight coming up here on Saturday. That's true. I do think she'll win. I just think you got to be careful with the reach advantage and the height advantage for Kim in that fight as far as that goes. Denise Knowles, Moicano seems to think that he deserves more than he does. No shade, but he was finished by Aldo Zombie and Ortega. He needs to work his way up at lightweight. I agree with you in terms of Moicano thinking that he's going to get a top 5 opponent at featherweight. My only thing is that he does have that win over Calvin Kattar, right? So that does hold a little bit of weight with how well Kattar's done in that division. Just 2 losses to Moicano and to Zabit. So that holds a pretty good win. That could, in some circles, indicate that he should fight a top 5 featherweight. But look, I don't want to see Moicano at featherweight anymore. The last fight he had at featherweight, he was knocked out, I think, in part to the weight cut and in part to fighting a guy who's just leaps and bounds ahead of him in the Korean Zombie. So personally, I would like to see him stay at lightweight as far as that goes. As I got some allergies here, it's not COVID. Don't worry, we're all good here. But I think in general, Moicano is probably going to get someone decently ranked, like a Gregor Gillespie, someone like that. I mean, he did come off a good win in his lightweight debut for the UFC, but he's not getting like an Anthony Pettis. Like I think he's going to end up taking a fight that's a little bit outside the top 15, but someone somewhat decent. But he's just got to continue fighting. That's the best way to put it. And I see Fan of the Sport saying here, Moicano's legit, but lightweight is a shark tank. It is, but I think Moicano's can be a dangerous guy. Look at the wins he had at featherweight. He's a pretty solid prospect as far as that goes. Let's take a couple more questions here and then we'll wrap things up, people. Again, really appreciate you tuning in. Let's see. No crowd affected Smith's performance. His output in that first round against Glover was way too much. I agree, but like I said, I thought he was going to go and potentially finish Glover in that fight. So we'll see. A lot of question marks heading into this main event. Even if you're the biggest Alexander Rakic fan, you got to know there's still some questions being answered about him. Some of those wins were good, but is it a case of circumstances or is it a case that he's that good? We'll find out on Saturday. It's a big test for both guys there. We see Dan Tom in the chat here. Go check out Dan and Dan's show every week here on Line Movement. They do an awesome job. Dan Tom, like I said, best analyst in the game right now. If you're not following him on Twitter or following him on this channel every week, you guys are missing out. You're getting some extra stuff. And Dan Levy, one of the most entertaining hosts we have in the game right now, always bringing the facts and spitting the knowledge there as well. So they just do such a good job on Line Movement. I'm so happy to be a part of them and have them part of this team here. How many light heavyweights does Bellator actually have? Fan of the Sport. Well, they got Bader, Phil Davis, Lyoto Machida. Yeah, they got like a decent stable, but yeah, I mean, if you compare it to the UFC, I think the UFC's got a few more guys in there that are a little bit more legit, but it's been sort of a changing of the guard in the UFC. Gone are the days of, like guys like Shogun and John Jones and a lot of these other sort of household names in that division. Now you're seeing, newcomers like Blachowicz and, Yuri Prokaska, who just won not that long ago. He's another guy that, is going to make some noise in that division as far as that goes. So we'll see what happens. I'll just get 2 more questions here, and then we'll wrap things up as we're at the top of the hour here. Denise says, Manuel keeps hinting that he's coming back. If he does, I will not watch. I'm with you there. Why come back? Look, I think it's pretty obvious that he can't compete at a high level anymore. He took a lot of damage. Is he going to go? Does anyone, even the biggest Jim Emmanuel fan, think that he can come back and win a UFC title? I don't. The guys in this division are killers. I don't see him fitting in well, especially with the fact he's been knocked out a few times. I don't like it either. So hopefully that does not end up happening here as well. And then obviously we're referencing the Nemkov and Yuri fight as well, which is a very close matchup. But Yuri could be fighting for a title one day. We never know how good he really is. He really impressed me in that Volkan Ozdemir win as far as that goes there. All right, good time to wrap things up as we're not getting any more questions, but that's fine. Covered a lot of stuff here on today's show. Just want to first thank my producer Jordan for doing such an awesome job behind the I do this show every week, Octagon Outlook, every week at 1:15 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure you guys tune in, and more of a general show, but we talk about some news as well, which is really great too. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. If you didn't get your question asked here today, I'm more than happy to do it in my DMs, which are both open on both platforms. And like I said, subscribe to this YouTube channel, youtube.com, Line Movement. Just type in Line Movement, type in James Lynch. You'll find me. Subscribe. My best interviews go here every week. I got some stuff in the works coming up for this week as well. So keep your eyes out for that. Check out Dan and Dan's betting show every week. The best show in the business as far as I'm concerned, as far as a betting preview show that you're going to get. Just nothing like you get from other places. You get the best analysts from, Dan Tom's perspective, and then you get Dan Levy as well with his, tape study and betting perspective, and just his personality too. He had me cracking up last week with some of those comments there on the show. But I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday and enjoy Contender Series tomorrow night and UFC Vegas 8 on Saturday. I'm out of here. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday. See you later.